I want to welcome you all to our session 3 of Introduction to Character Design. This session is called Make Your View Askew. This 3-part session forms part of the peer-to-peer series with New Bedford Creative. My name is Margot Saulnier. I am the Director of Creative Strategies and Arts-Based Initiatives at the New Bedford Economic Development Council. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Roger Andrews. And I will pass it over to him to give more details about who he is and what he will present today. I'm so happy to have you here, Roger, and I'm going to go ahead and mute myself right now.
Thank you, Margot, and I appreciate you again inviting me to participate in these sessions. Everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I should say that this is the third in a series of 3 sort of intro to character design. Why character design? For me, it's one of, as an artist, it's probably one of the things that I'm actually known for. And how I became known from that is kind of a little interesting story, but which I will share. But character design for me is it's more than just creating a cute character, a angry character, a vicious character, a heroic character. It's more than all that. It's actually infusing storytelling into characters, in effect, to create a point of view within that character that you've created, or to be able to take a inspiration from a written source. Because oftentimes when I get pitched characters to create and to design, it's often in writing, whether it be email or actual, back in the day, actually like written briefs. And my goal or my role or my job as a character designer or an artist who does that for an occupation is to infuse life into these words on the page or on the screen. And that's every character, from the lead roles all the way to the supporting characters. In some cases, I have to create some sort of personality or something that is dynamic to things that are like vehicles and environments and all that too, because they become a character as well. But if we focus just on the tangible characters that are identifiable. And so what do I mean by character design? I mean, for example, if you look at, we're going to use the Star Wars brand. Hopefully everyone's familiar with Star Wars. It's kind of ubiquitous, but so I've actually over my shoulder, I don't know if you can see, got some Star Wars characters that I've rendered on the wall there. There's little Princess Leia. It's my daughter when she was like 2. It's Darth Maul back there, Bob Marley. But anyways, and so if you look at the Darth Maul over my shoulder there, that is obviously a character that was put through the ringer in terms of generating that, what the look and feel of that character is going to be. But every single brushstroke or every single pencil sketch, every bit of graphite that was put down on paper to create that character, the goal of the artist was to infuse this, the end product with life, to make it dynamic, to make it memorable. And that's kind of what I want to focus on part 3. So when I say character design, it's not always, it's oftentimes it's stuff that I generate from scratch, meaning like a client will come to me with a product or for example, somebody might come up with a mascot for a school, for example, the Panthers. I just recently did one for Quabbin schools. Their Panthers is their mascot, their team mascot. So obviously someone's going to come up with the look of the Panther. And that's me. I look at that as character design, all the way up into these characters who are already pre-existing licensed characters. This is, Optimus Prime and Bumblebee from the Transformers series, Hasbro owned. And so Hasbro commissioned me to come up with these sort of unique proportioned versions of these 2 characters. And so that was my role. It's another form of character design. Again, I mentioned Hasbro. I showed this in the initial first pass, so I'll do it again. Again, I've worked on all of these characters for Hasbro And no, all of these characters are probably dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens more under their umbrella. And what I primarily do is I create characters and images and environments for the gameplay, the toy play, and oftentimes the packaging that that you see when you go to the store to buy these products, to buy the toys and games. So as you can expect, as an artist, like there are, you know, it's funny. It's when I was a kid, I never realized that every single thing that you see on a store shelf, someone had to design and somebody had to provide the illustrations for and bring it all together and to have it produced and then actually distributed to the world. And so my role in it is to be the guy who comes up with concept sketches. Like as you can see here, you can see this guy's I call him Cavity Sam. If we all recall the game Operation growing up. And so my task, what was given to me from the folks at Hasbro, was to develop a slightly updated version of Cavity Sam. And so for the Operation game. So my role was to literally create what this is called a turnaround, where you take, it's basically a character sheet, and I render them from all the different angles. So that way we have sort of a touchstone, a template for when we want to be able to render them over and over again. And this is the image that eventually, this is the underdrawing that was used in the final image, which may or may not be on here. No, it's not on here. But you can see characters like this guy. He is definitely on here. Zuzu Pets. And so again, my role is to either create and generate images from scratch, or to take existing characters like these guys from Toy Story and do renders of them that are not 1-to-1 ratio of the existing art. Because let's face it, if you're Pixar and you generate all the 3D models for Woody, for example, as we see Woody here, you don't need me to come in and do a new drawing, unless you want to add a little different kind of flavor to the character. And that's really all I did in this case, just add a little flavor to the character. And this is obviously the final render for the product. All right, hopefully everybody kind of picking up on that. And so throughout my my little presentation here, we have these images that of pre-existing characters. And then what I will do is I'm going to go into my trusty Procreate, and I'm going to share with you some thumbnail sketches and some images of characters or design projects that were required me to come up with images from scratch for characters. You know, for example, this little character. This is also, you know, I showed you the what we call it, sort of the one sheet or the turnaround or the sort of the character sheet, the character study, where you have, you know, basically the character on a standing flat, not doing anything dynamic, but you can see all the angles from the front, side, and rear of the character. So that way you can generate sculptures or whatever you need, or you can actually generate 3D renderings off of those. In this case, this is just a style board. This is literally taking that character, this little character, and doing sort of like variations so that we can kind of see the character in action, so you can get a feel for the personality of this character. Hopefully you guys can see and recognize that this, you know, this is a way of kind of sharing with the client, like how this character moves and operates and feels, right? That's an important part of character design. Also, I'm oftentimes asked to do these really loose gestural sketches. This is for an existing game. I think it's called Wildcard. I think it's Wildcard Direct. It's I believe it might be a 3D game. I'm not quite sure, or something that's I'm sorry, not 3D, a virtual reality game, I believe. But I'm not 100% certain, because I don't always get all the facts. I just kind of get, hey, Roger, we need this character drawn in different sort of poses. So literally, I will get what is described as kind of a character sheet, or that one-off, or that turnaround. Sometimes just a front view of this character. And it's incumbent upon me to take that and come up with these poses. Hopefully you guys can see these okay. And it's literally like, yes, you can. All right, so they're literally like, right, hopefully you guys can see, they're not terribly well rendered. They're just kind of like quick and gestural.
Are they actually done on Procreate, or do you do them on paper? Because I have got Procreate, but I don't actually know how to use it. I'm not quite sure about the class. Is it, do you draw on paper, or do you draw on computers, or?
You know, what's so funny is like everything, by the way, this presentation I'm doing right now on the iPad, right? We're within the Procreate app right now. And guys, but the main point of all of this is why I called this particular session a view, kind of like a view askew, and not to take off on Kevin Smith, view askew universe, but by being askew, what I mean is, hopefully you'll notice that like none of these images, particularly the action poses, are stiff. Hopefully they're not anyway, but I should say hopefully not stiff or bland or boring. So yeah, so just moving on, hopefully you guys are seeing this stuff okay. I just wanted to share with you, some of those images were, of course, a little more original, a little more from the video game world. This is, again, back to the Star Wars realm. This project was literally to kind of draw this Han Solo, but in different, unique ways, not the traditional proportions. And so I tried my best to make each one of these dynamic. And again, to make the view of these askew, to make them not so simple, not so upright, not so plain. And if you noticed, hopefully you guys can see it, like just about every one of these poses, there's a bit of some sort of twist or arc, or sometimes through the hips, sometimes through the shoulders, but there's always some sort of like characters are leaning forward, leaning back, their body weight is shifted. This, by the way, for me, of the 3 sessions, by the way, just as a recap, the first session was just sort of identifying characters and kind of seeing what basic shapes are there that are the most effective to kind of be able to kind of lay down a really interesting or convincing character design. And then the second session was kind of being able to see the forms and structures that are underneath that make these characters. And this third one for me is the most crucial one for anyone who wants to kind of develop their own style, because it's one of the things I get asked all the time from artists is like, well, how do you develop your own style, or how do you create that, or what do you need to do to make that happen? And by the way, this is me giving you the formula. This is in my opinion the way that artists distinguish themselves from other artists. Like there are certain ways of rendering characters. We'll stick with just characters alone, that are unique to you. And I think in order to find that uniqueness, you can't be so straightforward. It can't be just a simple character just laid out on a page, front point of view, dead-eyed. Yes, you can get all the detail of the costume or whatever particular features you want to show, but I don't know how interesting it is and how special it is unless you start tweaking it and twisting it and figuring out ways to make it unique and being really ultra creative. And so I showed this character at, as one of many. I was given this assignment to come up with these. These are STEM characters in, what is it? Science, technology, engineering, or STEAM. Is it STEAM? Might have been STEAM.
Well, we like to say STEAM because it has
STEAM.
arts in there and math. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you. So these characters are different versions to represent tech and science, math. Here's another science one, another variation. But actually, this is a good example right here. That character is sort of a manifestation of the science kid's power. But hopefully you can see like the way I rendered this character. That's not just a simple. I could have just drawn a character standing next to him, simple, right? But by rendering him in this manner, or him, or it in this manner, it gives you a little more flavor, a little more energy, a little more storytelling. And if you seek that, if you really try to kind of infuse all your art, even on this loose sketchy stage, it will certainly give your images or the characters that you create, it will give them personality, and that personality now becomes tied to you, and it then starts to make you marketable as a character designer. If there's a certain look or feel that you're able to generate with your art, it's massively valuable. Oh, by the way, just as a aside, remember how we mentioned panthers earlier as a mascot? This is actually the panther that I worked on for the school. actually in conjunction with my my art collaborator, Ashleana Felice. But anyway, so there's a panther. So it doesn't have to be a full version of a character. It can actually be just that. It can be just a headshot. So this is a fun one, guys. This was the client is doggy toys. And so what they wanted to do is wanted me to come up with these interesting sort of little monsters that will be basically these sculpted doggy toys. So these are all chew toys. You can see here, like it's a little Frankenstein chew toy, you know, kind of the rope one with the little head on there. There's a little Wolfman one, little Dracula looking ones. But again, the mandate on this, guys, is literally it was a 1-sentence brief. We want to do dog toys, but we wanted to be like in these old school monsters, like in, you know, that's literally the direction I got from the art director. And so I just basically, you know, started filling a page with all these little wacky characters that I think ultimately would be, some of them will be cool and some will get used and some may not, but I just wanted to share that with you as well. Let's see what else we got in here.
Can I ask a question, Roger?
Please.
When you get a brief like that, that's 1 sentence, do you immediately go to sketching out ideas? Do you, like, what's your process? Do you brainstorm a list or do you immediately go to the sketchbook?
Yeah, for me, I think because I love it. I love doing this. So there's a shortcut, or should I say the time between the brief being delivered to me and the time that I start sketching is very, very quick. I generally don't need a lot of additional sort of like in other words, I don't need to start creating a list of different attributes based off of the direction that I want to do. I just start drawing, right? So like, for example, this character's from Kung Fu Panda. And I was just doing like pose studies because this is also going to be another toy. And so literally the mandate was just to come up with just different sort of variations off of the proportions of the original character from the cartoon or from the movie. And that's all that was. And so rather than me saying like, oh, you know what I really need to do? Let me write down, I want to pose where he's being held up on one hand, right? With one hand up. Or I'll be like, well, I want to have a dynamic kicking pose. You know, the bottom line is, Margo, for me anyways, I don't need to write that down. Some artists you may need that extra step to kind of be like, all right, let me sort of orient my ideas or let me sort of collect them in written form before I start sketching them out. You know, like this one, you sort of bouncing on the bamboo. Like I literally just start laying the digital pen down, you know, I lay the Apple Pencil right on the surface and just start going. And this is ultimately, so it creates for me these pages of, you know, oh, by the way, this is those standard front views that I was referring to. There's that character, right? And yeah, he's okay. I mean, it gets the point across. You can kind of see like all the little details, even though this is a very rough sketch. You can see all the details, like, you know, how his little bracelet is and how his little feet curl up and, right, how his tail kind of comes up behind. You can see that. But for me, let's see if I can find that page again. There you go. To me, he's not alive until you see him in action, right? You start seeing his expression, right? And how his body, like, you know, this stuff, how his eyebrows and everything, all of this stuff is a reaction to, is informed by the character. And so as part of it, Margo, oftentimes I'll get a character brief from the art director or from the creative team that will give me a list of the characteristics that make up this character. Like, you know, this is Master Sifu. You know, I've seen the movie, so I was aware of him. But, you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain way to present him if I'm going to capture, like, his energy. Again, actually, that's the best way to describe it. It's energy. And that's, to me, when you want to make things askew, it's about tapping into a certain energy that you can infuse oftentimes into even the most static scenes or static images or static characters. Like even this little guy, I mean, it's almost like a little throwaway image, but even his expression, this little upturn on his mouth, there's a little like sort of like, I don't know if he's kind of peering into you a little bit, you know, and he's a little bit sly, like almost like he knows the answer already, right? And that, it's hard to convey that in just a simple, flat, no expressionless character page. And so that's, I think I have some panda ones in here. I think I do. Yeah, there you go. So I got some actual Kung Fu Panda ones in there. Again, a lot of these poses are just, you know, it's just me sort of taking inspiration from the existing character sheets designed by the cartoon developers and just doing my own versions and takes on it in this case. Cool, enough of the panda world. It's tigress. All right, so some of you who may have children may remember, I can't remember what this product was, but they were like these little characters that attach to your fingers. Someone on the chat might know. Or I think that the product still exists. It's still on, you can still buy it. And again, from that company, they wanted just some different takes on rendering these little finger attaching toys. And so this is just me, like I was mentioning earlier, just I open up a blank page, and hopefully you guys who saw the second session will see in these sketches the construction lines, the underdrawings, the stuff that I use to sort of, you know, obviously it's part of, oh, I just erased a section of it. It's part of the form and structure of the characters. And I really, to be honest with you, for me, I can't even see rendering characters without putting in sort of the construction stuff that gives you the impression that these characters have some sort of dimension or depth. They don't, they're just two-dimensional on a screen, but hopefully that is, it's evidence that they have some, you know, the intention, it's evident that they have some sort of dimensionality to it. This was done for, I did a whole series. I don't even want to open the file on this one in terms of the layers. There's like millions of layers of different images for this product. It's for a video game. I think it's called Hill Climber 2, I believe this one was for. And so there's some characters from Hill Climber that I did. Oh, that's only one file one. But so there's a bunch of different characters. And oftentimes also too, it also goes to scenes. This is again, a super loose thumbnail sketch for a project. And it's literally just trying to figure out what is the most dynamic point of view, which is ultimately what it's all about. Finding that most dynamic point of view and trying to make it so that it is the best way to sell whatever that idea is or whatever that character is doing. Again, more sort of character designs. This is, by the way, this is, believe it or not, in that Hill Climber universe. There's like this Hill Climber character, and the task here was to come up with a different variation, like almost like these were members of his family. And so I had to come up with different variations of that. It's like literally, this is the one that I was referring to. This has got like dozens and dozens and dozens of different versions of this character. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. Like literally different takes on him. Different, again, products, like this is his little gas can that's part of the game, kind of developing that. Again, infusing it with personality wherever possible, making it askew, just simply by changing the point of view here on that one, this guy here, it changes it. All right, so actually this is maybe a good opportunity for me to kind of do a little sketching if I have the time. Hopefully let me throw a new layer on, like I can squeeze in another new layer on this guy. So by askew, this is what I mean. I think a mistake that a lot of artists make when doing their character designs is they're too rigid in wanting to go front view. All right, there's my character. All right, now I'm going to add all the details that make this character who he is. And he's got some shoulder pads, maybe he's got some big gloves. Who knows? All right, maybe he's got some big boots. Whatever. All right, maybe he's got a big old belt buckle. Who knows? He's got something going on, right? And he's got some earmuffs. Whatever. That's the character, right? Yes, it works. Yes, it tells, you know, you can get all the detail you need to do in that sketch, right? That's one way to go, and it's one way to do it. But for me, like how much more interesting it would be is if you, again, askew the POV. Let me just change the color to something that is maybe a little more dynamic. So in order for me to get that, what I do is I like to create like a little binding shape. This kind of goes to lesson 2. Like I start with sort of like, all right, so that's the point of view. And then I render to that point of view. Because I now have something that makes it a little more interesting. Hopefully you guys will agree. This is big belt buckle. If I render this character from this point of view, hopefully you guys will agree that this same earmuff character, oh, I almost got his shoulder pads. It's just a little more interesting, I think, from this point of view. This sort of like, yes, yes, this works. Straight on, we get just the facts, or we can take it and we can throw it at this low angle. And now we've got something that's just a bit more interesting, right? That's the point of it. Like if you can seek opportunities to figure out a way to render your stuff in such a way that it's dynamic and even dynamic standing still. This is still just a character standing, right? But it's just a little more interesting that way. And another way to go is, and this is hugely important, is you can go the other way too. By the way, you can go top down. Actually, let me do it even more extreme. You can go top down too. You can go where the head and everything kind of goes down into space, you know, basic perspective. But even then, it's still a little bit more interesting than this guy. Even though this one right here gets the gold star in terms of perspective for a character if you want it to be a little more dynamic, right? Hopefully that makes sense. And let's see. And so last thing I want to do is I want to end before I kind of get out of, I'm going to go back out to my images. And I have these comic book style ones, and I kind of glossed over these in the first session, but I'm going to share some of these images. All right. So this one is, you know, I think, you know, in my opinion, okay. You know, it's only successful in that if there's a story being told, like with this little Yoda character and all these like clone helmets in his little, you know, in his little, I don't know, his little dormitory. I mean, his little, what is it, little cabin or whatever, the little hut that he lived in, right? But to me, it's too static. It's too character in the center of the frame. It's too simple, right? It's okay, right? Let's take another scene. This is actually taken from a comic book cover. This is my version. I did a take on a homage to an existing comic book cover, but I try to do it in my own personal style. But look how much this guy is still at center of the frame, right? Still sort of facing forward, right? Just like little Yoda sitting there in his little hut. But look how much more dynamic this is. Just simply by like, there's this elements of action that were infused in this little frame to make it a different vibe and a different take on how to handle that. There's another little example. Askew, right? This is, by the way, this is an original character. I have no clue what this was for. I think I actually did this for Johnny Cupcakes years ago. If anybody's familiar with the Johnny Cupcakes brand, the t-shirt and apparel brand out of Boston. But yeah, I think I submitted this to him a couple of years ago. But again, the character itself is only interesting because, I mean, he's a very, there's not much to this character. I don't even think he has eyes, to be honest with you. It kind of looks a little bit like a minion. Right, unintentionally, because this is maybe years and years before Minions ever came out. And but he's askew, right? He's got this sort of lean to him, and his proportions are off. And it just, hopefully you'll agree, it's a little more interesting than that. And then you could look at some of these scenes. I have some scenes that I put in here as well. Let's do this one. this little sort of like Harley Quinn and Joker scene. Again, it's only interesting in that like there's elements that are there's an askew quality to it. This sort of that panel that sneaks in from the side. You've got your Joker and your Harley Quinn, and they're posed in such a way that hopefully that makes them interesting. Same thing here. This sort of Flash and his villain, his rogues gallery, him sort of racing in to go challenge his rogues gallery of characters. All right. Hopefully there's an interesting angles to it. This one, I think the background does some of the heavy lifting for for making the point of view interesting. But what I think hopefully is cool about this one, and this is another major thing to infuse, guys, in your character design, or at least in your style pages, is foreshortening. If anyone's not aware, I mean, foreshortening is kind of the act of being able to take an object, or actually it could be your body parts and kind of your hands or your feet, and sort of kick them towards the camera if you were taking a photo, and therefore meaning that like that fist or whatever you put closest to the camera becomes larger in the frame, and it gives you this sense of depth. And sometimes you can really push that. You can through foreshortening to really exaggerate it to make it look a little bit more dynamic. That's a hugely important thing to do. Again, this is kind of it's a little more straight. Had I to do it all over again, I probably would have angled her off a little bit, but I think the background does a lot of the heavy lifting on this one as well, and the smoke. I think this one's helped by the point of view, the camera angle point of view, how it's so low, looking up at the lead character, the sort of female Deadpool. Again, I got dozens. By the way, I got dozens and dozens of these things in here. Nope, another good example of foreshortening. That kick you right in the face, right there. Get one right in the face. And so, hey, maybe that's the takeaway, Margot, is kick them in the face with your art. That's it. Just kick. Everybody's got to get kicked in the face with their art, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
So I have there are a couple comments and questions in the chat. Demarian, do you want to come off mute and ask your question, which I think is really an important one?
So my question is, when you're doing your initial character sketches and you're getting down your core ideas, I know you've been really emphasizing the importance of dynamic poses, the view askew. Do you like to have the initial frontal view to get down the base core concepts and the initial look, and then implement dynamic posing to get a better sense of character and how they come alive within that design afterwards? So do you start with dynamic poses, or do you start with the simplistic view?
I think it depends on the character.
Okay.
If it's a character from scratch or one that I'm unfamiliar with, an existing character I just haven't rendered yet, I will take the effort and just draw like a front view, just so I can have the details of the costume and the relative proportions of how things are.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll render a side view, and then if I'm really feeling, froggy, I'll render the rear as well if it's got a cape or something, like just to kind of get a sense for it. I mean, these are quick sketches. You're talking like minutes, to lay it down just to have a feel for it. Mm-hmm. Then that's one layer, again, because I'm working in Procreate, so I can get away with this. Then the new layer is the action. Now it's the foreshortening, it's the dynamic angles, it's the changing of the POV, point of view, like that stuff. So that's an awesome question. Yeah. So in terms of process, now if it's a character, like if you ask me right now to draw Darth Maul over my shoulder, right? I don't need it. Right. I don't need to do the preliminary sort of setup because I've rendered him enough times, whether it be as toys or as commission pieces or whatever, that I'm ready. I know where the horns are. I know where all the stuff is. I know his costume. I can just let it rip. So it's really dependent on like my familiarity with it, and then what, and actually sometimes level of complexity too. Some characters are so simple, it doesn't matter. Like if it's, it's a little Pokemon character, I could just render them. I have a sense of it. But if it's somebody really intense, like a lot of anime characters have a lot of, something with wings and, and flowing like garments and all that. I'd want to have a real good sense of it before I start manipulating it.
Your style with each of the characters is so very different. I mean, you talk about style and you talk about characters, but there's a big difference. Every one of your characters, you can't tell who the artist is. A lot of artists, when they do characters or when they do any kind of a painting, you can look at the painting and tell whose artwork it is. And so I wanted to know if that was intentional, or is that something that or is that something that's just intrinsic to your personality?
I think what it is, Paula, is I'm actually adapting to the client. So it's client specific in terms of like how far I can push the style.
Mm-hmm.
By style though, however, I like to sort of further define it. For me, like and I've heard, I'm not saying this for myself, I'm saying it from people who hire me. They identify a specific style in how I render. There's a level of density in my line art. There's a level of, hopefully, again, it's gonna sound pretentious, so please forgive me if it does. There's a level of fluidity to the way I render. And there's a level of energy that is infused in the characters, the way I render. So that is the style. That's the thing that I can lay my hat on. I can put my hat on. I can hang my hat on. But in terms of like the details of the characters themselves from the licensed brand, I have to adapt. I have to get into their world and try to render it in a way that honors the original concept of the creative team. You know, so it's essential. It's my job to be able to capture the essence of those characters within a style that's at least close to what they want, unless, Paula, they specifically ask otherwise. And there's some examples in there that like literally like, here's our character. We want you to make him like this little tiny chibi character. This little, you've seen them in there, right? The little big head and big hands and feet characters. Like that's me infusing my own stylistic take on pre-existing, well-developed, well-designed characters.
So the third question really is, you talked about doing other people's work and the work that's been created by other artists, but then is there, are there sort of rules around copyright, or, I mean, how do you protect your own work? Is that something that you build into the pricing as a one-time off, or, I mean?
Right. Well, that's all right. So there's a lot to unpack in there, Paul. Let me see if I can get it through. In terms of like copywriting, copywritten stuff or stuff that's worked, that comes from intellectual property. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes I'm being hired by the source, mm-hmm. the people who own the rights to that property. Mm-hmm. So for example, like I showed you the Transformers thing, like Transformers is not mine, you know, obviously.
I understand that.
And so, so Hasbro owns it. So Hasbro said they commissioned me to create artwork that they can leverage to sell their product, right? So there's zero issues there. Like literally I sign a non-disclosure agreement and I agree not to reuse the artwork I created for them, to use it for myself to profit. That's the agreement. That's the kind of legality of it. But in terms of you generating your own original art and putting it out there to the world, here's the thing I always tell people, and this is a challenge because I know a lot of artists are really concerned about this stuff getting stolen. And it's a valid concern, right? Because stuff I put on the internet, I've seen other people taking, like I probably have thousands of images on the internet. And I know some people have used images over the years for whatever, for their whatever purposes. I'm not even gonna speculate. And you have to ask yourself as an artist, do you have the legal team and the wherewithal to pursue a copyright infringement of your original art?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the thing that people don't really understand about copyrights and art. It's like, you got to defend it. If somebody steals your art, you got to pursue it. You got to get the legal team. You've got to prove that they did it.
Yeah.
And then hope. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand both ends of that spectrum, but at what point do you decide to keep something for yourself? Is there, or as an artist, do you feel like you are sort of representing what you see in the world and are just sharing it with the world,
right,
openly?
You're asking me, so as part of, like, I'll give you an example. These projects that I get, I'm happy with infusing my take on the intellectual property. Like that that brings me the joy. Like, I don't need beyond that. Like, I served my purpose. In other words, I fulfilled my mission. And I'm very satisfied, and they compensate me for that.
Yeah.
And I'm okay to, because I feel very confident that if I needed to generate my own original content, I could. And so for me, I'm very gratified by delivering on what I'm assigned to do.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, my assignment is to take their characters and render them in the most interesting way that allows them to generate commerce from it. And if I wanted to generate commerce for myself with my own original content, then of course now we enter into that realm of like, how do I protect it? You know, when I present it to the world, right? Whether it be through Instagram or any other source. And when you put an original character on Instagram, just know that it's out now. It's, you know, you can watermark it, you can do whatever you can to protect it, but it's out there now.
Yeah.
And I accept it, and I'm not so precious with it, because I always feel like I feel very confident I can generate new stuff. I think where people run into trouble is if their approach of rendering or their approach of creating art is singular. Like, they put all their time and energy into this one thing, whether it be a painting or whatever it is. And then all their energy and all their love and their passion is tied up in this one thing. It's a commodity at that point, right? And you have to now market it if you want to sell that to someone else to be able to make an income off of it. For me, like, my commodity is my creativity. And so for me, again, this is just my own personal thing. My commodity is my creativity. So when someone comes to me and they want to task me to use a little piece of my creativity, then I share that at cost. And I'm happy to deliver on them to the best of my ability, and then move on to the next project. Okay.
So you're kind of a gunslinger. Okay.
Yeah. No, literally, I would call myself that. Like literally, I would come into an agency and be the lone, they clock in 9 to 5. I come in at noon. I do my little sketches. I leave at 6, 7 o'clock at night, and they're still working. I'm home.
Yeah.
I delivered on what they asked me to do. If they're very happy with it, I submit my invoice and we call it a wrap.
Okay. Cool. And then the last question is, well, it was actually the second question around style. How much study do you put into characters? I mean, you talked a little bit about the simplicity, but in terms of providing a range of dimensions and, dimensionality and so forth and so on, does that depend on, the contract? Is this sort of do you have a minimum methodology that you use to do a study?
Yeah, no, and when it comes to those style studies, Paula, those oftentimes they are dictated by the character itself, or the series, or the characters within the series. There's some characters, again, there's a level of complexity to them.
So do you have like a range of hours?
Well, not really. To be honest, if you're curious about like how I would like bill for something like that, like for example, those Kung Fu Panda sketches that I was showing, like those are probably, I would charge probably by the hour for those. Like when it's in early stages, preliminary sketches, brainstorming, thumbnails, that stage is generally by the hour. I have a set, because I've been doing this so long, I kind of know how much I want to make, and I know how much time and energy I'm going to put into it. I think when you're first starting out, you're going to probably, and this is awesome advice for anybody who's first starting out or who's trying to kick off their career or who is at a place in their career they want to pivot into something else, and then present that. What I highly recommend for anyone is overcharge for everything. I don't know. I know nobody asked for this part of it, this sort of commerce part of it, but since you asked, I think oftentimes artists, just because you're not established doesn't mean your art doesn't have value. And I think a lot of artists kind of get into this place where they're like, well, I just want to sell my art. I just want my art out there. I would rather, at this stage in my life or in my career, I would rather have a client or a potential buyer or a benefactor or a patron go to you and say, whoa, it costs that much? Rather than saying, oh, okay, that all?
That makes a lot of sense. And just to clarify, go back to the Kung Fu characters. About how many hours did you put into that range of renderings? Was that
That's
a couple of weeks?
probably about a day's work.
About a
It's
day's
probably
work
each of those pages, probably a couple of hours per page.
per page, per character.
Per
Yeah.
character. Yeah, so
Okay.
you're talking, if I render 5 characters, it's about a 10-hour day.
Okay. All
About.
right.
But
I'm
at
just
that
trying
point,
to figure out, what's for someone who's really good at it, what's a norm so that you have some kind of a goal to know that when you're sort of moving or progressing in the right direction.
Right. Yeah, you need kind of like a touchstone, right? And in reality though, but here's the thing though, every artist is different. There's artists who render way faster than me. I consider myself that, if you ask me why, not that you're asking, you didn't ask, but if you did, why I stay busy and why I work so steadily, I think one is I listen to the client, and 2 is my speed. I'm able to execute a lot of sketches within a limited time, therefore giving my client many options. And, and that is valuable to them. There's my value, my ability to render what they want at speed. Now, here's the thing though, if you're an incredibly great renderer or illustrator or designer or whoever, and it takes you a bit longer to get to your process, to get to your final image, so be it. As long as that final image is such supreme quality, your client is thrilled.
Yeah. I'm actually not looking at doing what you are quite doing for others. I'm actually looking at creating a range of my own characters that, but you're so good and your range is so wide. I just want to have an idea of, what the pathway begins to look like, so I know how to.
The pathway starts small. The pathway is one little step. It's literally like open up a blank sheet. If you have a character that you want to render, you do your little turnarounds, your little sort of turnarounds, and then your next page is all action. It's all, and starting to visualize. Maybe it's not necessarily action. This could be a really, inert character, but there's probably ways to render it.
Have you done animation as well?
No. I've no.
Okay.
No, I don't have the patience for that. I'm not. Remember, I'm a hired gun. I come in, I get rid of all the bandits. I clean them out of the saloon, right? I get on my horse and I ride off in the sunset. That's every job. That's how I do it.
Okay.
First of all, thank you so much for your time and this class, and your outlook on life is wonderful. I believe these questions were answered a little bit before, but I just want to know, how do you determine how much time is, do you do that in advance when you're talking to a client, and how much time is going into each project so you get an ETA or a deadline?
Yeah, oftentimes the deadlines are, more often than not, is one of the first questions I ask when I'm being delivered a new project. It's one of the things I really like to sort of hone in on from, again, the creative team. They have a deadline. And oftentimes there's a production process that happens after I deliver the illustrations, the character designs, And so what I try to sort out very, very early on in every project is what their deadline is to receive my portion of the project, my contribution to the project. And once I sort that out, then I start modulating. All right, they want 5 characters drawn. They want a variety of different poses. I start in my mind, I start making this sort of checklist of all right, I need to do, 10 or 12 poses for this, X, Y, I start, and then because I've been doing this so long, it's almost autopilot. It's all right, well, that's going to cost about this. And that will allow me at that point to provide the client a really solid estimate of cost. And so over time, it's just over time. It's something over time, you do it enough times. And it doesn't take more than 4 or 5 projects before you start realizing, all right, it's going to take me about this long to do this, right? And once you've established that baseline, that's your minimum target, right? That starts to become your minimum target, meaning again, that assignment requires 5 characters for that 5 designs for that one character. It's going to take me 3 hours, say, to do it. All right, that's the minimum. Now the next job comes along and they need exactly the same thing. Who knows? Maybe I do it now in 2 hours, or maybe I do it in 1 hour. But oftentimes the fee is similar. or the same as what I, because I've become more efficient within that time frame. And ultimately, I think that's, again, it's speed and efficiency was what kind of gets me by, and hopefully creativity is what kind of gets me by. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
And I just had one more.
Sure.
I know you have kids. Do you find that you're staying up to date with trends and characters because of this too?
Yeah. In fact, my daughter has the same headphones you have. Ironically enough, the same identical headphones. But yeah, I mean, my daughter, she's 8, so she keeps me kind of like plugged into what's going on. And every now and then I'll be like, what is that? I'll be like, what's that character? And like Stranger, like I did some stuff for Stranger Things. These characters for, I believe it was for Hasbro. I think it was for Hasbro. And it had a whole wave of characters. So I got to be up on it. And I like, and I mentioned this in one of the previous calls. I'm up on it. Like I like pop culture stuff. I like Squid Game and Stranger Things and, and Poker Face and whatever's out. Like I'm up on that stuff. So I think for me, with the exception of some of the Japanese animated stuff, I'm not as familiar with. But if someone commissions me to do one, we all know there's a vast amount of research on the internet, right? There's no way that you can't find an image of every single character on Earth that you can't use to then make as a platform to make your new piece of original art. So yeah, so I try to stay up on it. I try.
Perfect. I mean, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was great. Thanks, Autumn, for contributing those last questions. I want to thank Roger for such a great session, for being here. This is his 3rd time. Just thank you all for joining today. Have a great day, and thank you for your participation. Take care.